Hi, if you guys have struggled with your weight, with cravings, with fatigue, feeling like your metabolism is just toast, everyone wants to blame it on food and change their diet around and try a different blend of macros. And the truth is we're starting to understand the real issue may not be food at all. It could actually be leptin. And leptin historically is something that can make us feel full and really good and complete and energized. And we know that a lot of people have what's called leptin resistance. And it turns out that leptin isn't just the fat hormone. We're starting to understand it more. It's a biological signal that informs the brain about how much energy you have, what your circadian rhythm is doing, and is it healthy, and what is your metabolic status, where you're reserved for energy. So I'm Dr. Lisa Koche. Today we're going to talk about how leptin can actually shape your metabolism, your energy, and your cell signals in ways that most people never learn. Like, these are just starting to become exciting, new scientific pieces of information. So let's dive in just a little bit. Leptin as a whole, I remember learning first about it when I was working with gastric bypass patients, and leptin is the one that makes you feel full and ghrelin is the one that makes you hungry. And the idea was when patients had gastric bypass that they would feel full all the time and that it would suppress ghrelin, the hunger hormone. It was a very barbaric and basic kind of way of understanding these hormones. And the truth is that it's way more complicated. So it turns out that leptin itself is secreted yes, it's secreted by fat and can make you feel satiated in that way, but it also follows the circadian rhythm. Who knew? I did not know this. Regulated by light exposure, and one that we talked in a previous video about your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is part of the brain that is responsive to light. So when you get outside, especially first thing in the morning, you have areas, specific ganglion cells in your eye. This is in addition to the historical rods and cones you may have heard of with vision. But you have these ganglion cells that are sensitive to light, that have a pigment called melanopsin, and they have a direct highway to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain. And the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain is responsible for some of these hormonal releases and timing control, and leptin happens to be one of them, which is really fascinating. So when you get light exposure, leptin gets regulated that way. It works on the hypothalamus, and so directly works in the brain, regulating your appetite, your energy, your sympathetic nervous system. So lots of really cool pathways that we did not understand a few years ago. And the receptors, turns out, are a little more dense in mitochondrial rich tissues. So you know that I love the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the most fascinating, and it turns out not to be no surprise that a lot of what we've not understood between metabolism and glucose and insulin control and hunger and all these things occur more in the mitochondria. So remember, the highest mitochondrial rich tissues are your muscles, your brain, your heart. So what happens is leptin is directly more active in these mitochondrial rich tissues, which makes sense, because if it's going to control energy expenditure and appetite, where's better place for it to be than in your muscles and your brain? So chronically elevated leptin, where it just stays high, we now know that your brain starts ignoring it. So we call that leptin resistance. We've been on a long hunt of trying to understand where that comes from, but it's associated with things like inflammation, your disruption of your circadian rhythm. The brain doesn't respond to the signal anymore. So some of this stuff that we keep hunting down, trying to figure out why are they not responding to leptin anymore? Why is the leptin going up? It's because the signaling is just thrown off, and very often that can be circadian rhythm. So the morning, when you're grabbing your phone in the morning, or even late into the night staring at blue light, that whole pathway of the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and how it's related to leptin gets dysregulated. When basically the light is healthy, leptin in addition to going up when you're full, is something that goes up at night because it helps with overnight metabolism, repair processes. And so when you have a lot, like I said, of that issue with nighttime blue light and so many people on their phones and not paying attention or honoring their body's processes and signals with the way that the rhythms of the day work, that's where a lot of dysregulation has come in. So it's really fascinating to me to see that many of the processes that we've been trying to hack, whether it's with gastric bypass, whether it's with diets, whether it's with different supplements, are really our life and how hijacked we as humans have come from the earth, right? From the ground, from honoring the sun, from honoring the rhythms that we're supposed to be in. So if we can get just super basic and practical, like I said over and over again, 5 or 10 minutes in the morning to start out, your cells and your leptin they want to know what time it is. So if we get, and they also know how to delineate the morning rays before, like within an hour of waking, those morning rays have the broadest ways to help the suprachiasmatic nucleus and help the circadian clock that's in the brain set for the day. We also know that we need to give a little bit of support at night. We can't just go on acting like the time of day doesn't matter. So maybe you do something super basic, dim your lights a couple hours before you want to go to bed. Think about going to bed a little bit earlier. This is hard for a lot of us because it's hard for me too. But if you can, think about trying to go to bed closer to when the sun actually goes to bed, which is harder during the winter when it goes down so early. But if you can at least cut down your eating, because the eating is another confusing signal. So if you can cut your eating, especially in the winter, earlier in the evening, closer to when the sun goes down, that will help the circadian hormone timing. And then making sure, understanding the mitochondria is where it's at. So the mitochondria is where it's at for so many things. But if it's where it's at for leptin as well, making sure that you're moving, that you're getting minerals, that you're doing breath work, that you're connecting to the earth, that you're maybe getting some red light exposure therapy, very light, sauna work, anything that can help your mitochondria function at a higher level is going to help reset some of that leptin signaling. And just know that when leptin signaling gets on the right path or is bathed in the right terrain of a healthy, non-toxic, light sense awareness, forget about even like going crazy with it, just be aware of what time it is. When you guys do that, your leptin signaling and your metabolic signaling is going to become clearer too. So if you've really been struggling with your weight, you've tried lots of different macro ratios without success, you've seen your blood sugar is high for random reasons that you can't quite figure out, let's just try this basic thing, right? Where you dim your lights a couple hours earlier, you cut your eating down, you get exposure early. This is all free stuff, guys. Get exposure early so that the circadian timing is understood in your body and your suprachiasmatic nucleus and your mitochondria in general. And then all these things you're trying are more likely to work. So very often, and this is the exciting piece, is we're going back to basics. It's not getting more complicated, it's getting more basic. So if this has helped, subscribe, join me on this journey, drop your questions below. I'm really excited to have all of you here, learn more and more about how, ancient, obvious truths are now being connected to the hardcore science. Thank you, guys.